Hey everybody, Tim Harridge here. Hope you're enjoying your time with your family. What I decided to do today is release the entire keynote session, 45 minutes. If you like this video, just do me a favor, click the little thumbs up button below and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And then just share it with your friends. Hopefully it helps entrepreneurs and real estate investors of all sizes and shapes. Uh, Figure out what to do with all this coronavirus nonsense. If you'd like the introduction and the Q&A followed by the panel discussion, just hop over to timharridge.com. You can buy that and you can watch the full 3-hour webinar. But just to help everyone, I wanted to go ahead and make this 45-minute version available. If you want the full version, like I said, pop on over to my website. Enjoy. Our keynote speaker today is Mark Datsur. Mark's an economist. I came across him at the Texas Real Estate Center when he used to run that place, and I met him at Homevestors Conference and follow his blogs. I follow his readings, publications. I follow his opinion pieces. I've been to more presentations of his than anything because I like people that are no nonsense and don't say things to make friends. They say things because it's what they believe. And he's going to tell you probably several times. He may be right half the time and may be wrong half the time. It's up to you to decide which half to follow. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, in the most virtual way possible, let's welcome Mark Datsur.
Thank you, Tim. That sounds great. Appreciate it. And it's nice to be with everybody this evening all over the country. I'm not going to really talk about Texas all that much at all. I'm talking about the whole country. I've been doing this. I've probably done 12 of these since 1st of April. So it's not my first rodeo here. My job, what I want to do this evening is hopefully give you some information to help you and your family make good business decisions. And also, some of you are in a position of advising other people, and I hope to give you some information that will help you be more professional in your ability to advise people. Lots of people are really confounded, really, I guess a good word for it. The economy is complex, always has been, but as we say here in College Station, it's even complexer than it used to be. So there's a lot to work our way through. There's no reason for anybody to get offended. My job's just going to be to lay out the economy and try to help people make good decisions. I think the only people that might get offended are people that are just too heavy into politics. And I totally get that. I'm apolitical. I find that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are the biggest blight on our economic future that we have. And I wish they'd get rid of both of those tribal parties. They mean nothing to me. So I'm just going to talk about policies. And again, that's right. I'm an economist. That means there's a 50% chance anything I say is wrong. But you could have paid $500,000 to get Brent Bernanke to speak here, Tim Geithner, and their odds wouldn't be any better than mine. That just comes with the trick. So with that said, I was trying to think. I came home middle of March from visiting my mom. And everything had changed. And it took me a while because I like to have a picture on the front of every presentation I make to try to represent the whole economy in one photograph. And I saw this picture of smoke, and it's just amorphous and it's hard to know what's in there. It's hard to grab a hold of it. I thought it's a perfect metaphor for where we are now. And then this idea of creation is groaning is, in my mind, a great metaphor. So I'm going to focus my remarks on analyzing the economy as it relates to investing in residential real estate. Back in 2008, when we had the financial catastrophe, at that point, people were talking about buying gold. And I started cracking jokes about it, that if you're even thinking about buying gold, I would recommend you take cocaine because at least you'll feel good before it kills you. And everybody in the room laughed that day except the dean of the business school. Deans just don't have sense of humor. They never have. And he found it kind of embarrassing, but all of his big donors told him he thought it was really funny. And I was his fair-haired boy for 5 years after that event happened. But the reason I told people that was, number one, we're not going to have runaway inflation. And number two, if we do have runaway inflation, there's other alternatives to gold, and single family houses is one of them. And so the people, there's probably 20,000, there's probably 50,000 people that have heard me crack that joke about cocaine and gold. And they won't remember the back half of why I said that. But why I said that was, if you're worried about inflation, the best thing you can do as an average person is buy a house in your neighborhood. You know that market better than any other neighborhood. And it is a hedge against inflation. And the reason for that is because the lease is only a year. So maybe you're leasing a house for $1,100 a month, and you have some kind of inflation event. At the end of 12 months, that rent goes from $1,100 a month to $11,000 a month, and your tenant renews the lease because they're making $20,000 a month in salary. That's what an inflation event is all about. Nothing magic to it whatsoever. So that's why I've been super bullish about investing in single family homes for the last decade, since 2008 actually. So if you'll go to the next slide, I would appreciate that. This is what we're under today. I know the stock market's back to near a record high. That's meaningless. What's happened here is it's kind of like 9/11 happened on every city on earth, all at the same time. What happened after 9/11? People were afraid. They were afraid that another terrorist attack could happen tomorrow in their community. So for a period of time, people hid in their house. And I remember watching it happen because within a couple of weeks, people got tired of being afraid. And I started giving speeches about 2 weeks after it happened. And I said, look, one of two things is going to happen. We're either going to get rid of terrorism, or people will get used to it. Because the American people aren't going to hide in their backyard and drink a beer for more than a couple of weeks. They're going to get angry about it, and they're going to get determined about it. And that's exactly what's happening this time. It's going to be lumpy and it's going to be uneven, because so you get tired of it, you get frustrated about it, you decide I'm ready to go out and do something. Well, you might be a little angry too, and so you act kind of stupid at the store and make somebody nervous for whatever reason. But it's just a growing pains. It's a new dance we're going to have to learn. And all of us are going to have to learn by ourselves how to act in this new age. But as I watch people start to come out again, I just look at this and go, I marvel at it. And so here's how it all fell out. The medical system was collapsed first, with the fear that we're just going to be overrun and people are going to be dying in the parking lot outside of hospitals and all of that. And of course, the national media loves a catastrophe. The national media, I have no confidence in any of them. I wouldn't watch any of them. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, Russia Today, they're all propaganda machines to me. I have no use for them. And as a business consultant, I find myself avoiding it like the plague, because you can actually cause yourself damage by what you see on there and become a poor reference for people that are trying to make good decisions. Stick with the Wall Street Journal and talk to clients. That's how I stay informed. I do nothing with any of the media. So the first thing that went was our medical system, and then our personal freedom went out the window. I'm just amazed at what we have allowed our government to do to us in terms of freedom. I mean, to me, you know, if you're out there and going, I don't know if I like you or not, I totally get it. A lot of people don't like me. But here's my bias. My bias is toward freedom and a strong economic future for the next generation. I've learned how to thrive through this one. I'm set. That'd be just Murphy's Law, that I'll die of COVID next year after I just was able to quit working and have earned enough money to enjoy it. I mean, that would just be Murphy's Law, but somebody else will enjoy it after me. But I am stunned at our loss of personal freedom, and I'm going to get into details of that in a minute. Then the businesses started to suffer. All of these are groaning, personal freedom groaning, then businesses because of all the obvious things. Then the bond market froze up. A lot of people were not aware of this happening, But on March 17th and March 18th, our bond market froze up every bit as bad, if not worse, than it did in 2008. And that's when the Fed started rolling out program after program after program. And then the stock market took a dive after that. There was those days where it was up 2,000, down 1,500, down 2,000, up 900, as the market was just in chaos pretty much. And then the supply chain started groaning because food, for one, farmers were still producing, chickens were laying eggs, cows were producing milk. But the problem is that in America, a bunch of our food goes to restaurants and the other part goes to the grocery store for us to use at home. And we used to eat out a lot at restaurants and not eat at home all that much. So when we all decided, let's cook out at home, the stores ran out of stuff. And meanwhile, there was a gross surplus of things at the restaurants. And we're starting to, that's part of the change, the new, I hate that word new normal, but it's a sloppy concept, but I'll use it. That's going to be the new normal. People are eating at home more often. So the supply chain has to change so that more food goes to the grocery store and less food goes to the restaurant going forward. And then lastly, state and local governments are groaning. You're not hearing much about that yet, but they're under huge duress. The state and local government budgets are going to get hammered because of lower sales tax revenue and hotel motel tax and even other revenues besides that. And so as we sit here tonight, I don't care that the stock market is near a record high again, or at least expensive again, or highly recovered from where it was. I don't care anything about that. The reason that happened is because the seas are still choppy. What's happened is the Federal Reserve has poured about 1,000 barrels of oil over a choppy sea so that it doesn't feel as choppy as it really is. But make no mistake about it. When you get down underneath the stimulus packages and the PPP package and the credit facilities, the waters are still immensely choppy right now. And that's why our government's going to have to stay in there and print more money and create more programs. But that's also why I would caution people that because the stock market's high means absolutely nothing about the health of the economy whatsoever. And I'll talk about that. And because of that, all the volatility in the bond market and all the volatility in the stock market, whenever that happens, I've been doing this since 1997. So this is not my first rodeo. And whenever you get volatility in the stock and the bond market, people naturally start going toward houses and real estate and land. And so when the young lady was telling us just a few minutes ago about how many people are calling to look at homes and all of that, doesn't surprise me at all, because I guarantee you, if a person had $1 million they just got from an inheritance and they had a choice between the stock market, the bond market, and real estate right now, a lot of them are going to choose real estate. Next slide, please. So here's kind of my take of the big picture. It's going to be a gradual recovery. It's going to start. I think it's starting right now. But we take a big hit. We haven't seen how much damage has happened to the economy yet. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the damage to the economy is massive. And so it's like the price of oil. When you're at minus $37 a barrel and suddenly you're at 11, that looks like a massive recovery. And when you're at $11 and then suddenly you're at 31, that looks like a massive recovery. But the fact of the matter is, all kinds of people in the oil and gas business are going to go bankrupt at $30 a barrel. And so we're going to have to just be realistic. I don't do Zig Ziglar power of positive thinking. Let's put some lipstick on a pig and sell something speech. I'm not Zig Ziglar. I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't have any self-esteem, so I don't care if you do either. The whole reason I'm here is to try to just lay the facts out to make good business decisions. My whole career has been based on the idea that if you tell people the truth with as much logic and fact as possible, they will make good business decisions, whether it's a great market or it's a terrible market. And I'm indifferent to them. People have said to me, you know, for an economist, you're kind of funny. I understand that, and some days I am, but in 2009, people were saying, you know what, for an economist, you're still kind of funny, but why is it when I hear you speak, I want to take a warm bath with a glass of red wine and a razor blade? And so I get both of those kind of comments, and I get it. I'm not here to lift everybody up, motivational speech. I'm here to hopefully help us all learn something. And so the other question is, how long will it be before we feel comfortable? And a lot of you in this audience that are 30 years old, 35 years old, you're probably comfortable already. You're probably ready to get out and rock and roll. And I want you to do that. I hope you do that. We need the economy moving again. But for a person like me, I don't feel that confident. I'm not ready to hop on. I won't be hopping on an airplane and flying to the UK for a vacation anytime soon. The other issue is what's going to happen next December coming up. Are we going to have another go around of this? Well, and will our government force us to abandon our businesses again every year? I feel better about that in the last 2 weeks because the American people are rising up and saying, you're not going to do this to us. No, you won't. You might want to, but we own this country and you can't make me lose my business just because you're a doctor and you think you have to protect everybody on earth from a virus. Nobody protects everybody on earth from a virus, and you can't ruin the strongest economy on earth because you're afraid that certain people will get the virus. I get it. It's a risky business. It's a risky world we live in. It's just a terrible trade-off, and I'm thrilled that the American people, I'm thrilled to find governors saying, oh, you know, I'm changing my mind. We were going to release the lockdown on this day. No, we're going to go ahead and do it now. I'm thrilled with that because that means these politicians understand who's the boss, who are the stockholders, and who's the public servant. And that thrills me to no end because I have nothing but confidence in the American people. Can they do stupid stuff? Of course. Could they go to the beach and sit and do mud wrestling or beach volleyball all together and 25 people get the virus? Of course they can. The American people aren't immune from being stupid, but that's what we have in America. We have a freedom to be stupid. And that's just the way it goes. But I'll tell you what, you can't destroy everybody's economic life and economic future because a small part of society is going to act stupid. It's just, we'd have to understand that. And then the next slide, please. This came to me a couple of weeks ago thinking about the oil and gas business because force majeure, I don't speak French. I live in a state that I haven't heard a French word said in 20 years that I've lived here. So I don't know how to pronounce it. Forgive me if you know. But force majeure means that I don't have to honor my contract. If I agreed to buy a bunch of oil from you at $52 and it's time for you to ship it to me, I don't want it. And you can't make me take it. It's an act of God or something else. And so combine that with what our government's done about encouraging people not to make payments on their mortgages or not to make payments on their rent. The value of a contract in this country has never been worth less than it is as we sit here today. And the risk premium for real estate is going to go up. How much, I don't know. I don't think it's going to dent prices because I think people want to own homes so bad. They're going to be willing to take a low yield. But all I'm saying is everybody that buys a house next week is going to be thinking about something different than they did 2 months ago. And that is 2 months ago, they never thought that their government would say, it's okay for you not to make your rental payment. In fact, it's okay for you not to make your mortgage payment for up to a year. So that's why the mortgage market's high. 30-year mortgages should be easily around 2.5% right now, and they're not. And the reason they're not is because there's risk in the mortgage market that you make a loan to somebody and they don't have to pay you for a year. Next slide, please. So I just morphed into this picture about a week ago because I see what's happening now is we've got this tug of war going on that I've already talked about, so I don't need to belabor it. Fear versus freedom, fear of illness versus freedom. And the American people, even these Britishers, I mean, everybody on earth loves, even people in China, a communist dictatorship, they love freedom too. Everybody loves freedom. And so right now we're in this tug of war. It's like, I'm kind of afraid. I kind of feel like I shouldn't go out. Oh, and some of my neighbors know it all, and they're going to shame me because I went out to a park. You see, I ask everybody when they try to shame you about something, ask them if they like freedom or not. That's a simple answer to this. And let's celebrate freedom. I totally get it. People have been brainwashed that this is the worst thing of all time. CNN, MSNBC, all of the news on TV, they love a catastrophe because that's how they sell advertising. And this is the catastrophe. This is like having 90 hurricanes all at the same time, all over the country. It's not just people in Florida watching for a hurricane. It's people in Ohio looking out for COVID. This is an extravaganza for the media, and they're going to do everything they can to be sure to let you know it's biblical. It's biblical proportions. It's catastrophic, just like a hurricane. We've never seen this before. It's going to be catastrophic. It's biblical. That's how they sell advertising. Those are their key buzzwords, and that's what they're doing right now. I have no doubt that the coronavirus is scary. I have a respect for that virus, that it could kill me. But I'm telling you that there's nothing new with that and flu and heart attacks and strokes and everything else. What's new about this is the lack of freedom. Nobody took away your freedom because I had risk of having a heart attack. Next slide, please. So I'll go fast through these, but these are just examples. Okay, so how could Cuomo come in and say, your business is non-essential? I just talked to the people that sell concrete today. They're essential business. So is a pot dispensary. I love that. So, okay, who made the decision that pot was a big deal and an essential service, and getting my hair cut wasn't? And trust me, I don't normally look this dorky. I haven't had a haircut since February. Bon Jovi on TV last night, right in the middle of a new song he's singing for 25 million people, he held up a white sign right in the middle while he's singing. He didn't miss a beat, and he says, "I need a haircut." I thought, dude, I need to put that in my presentation too. Next slide, please. Who decided who's essential and not? It's disgusting.
Government.
So the rule of law, then they come in and say, okay, so we're going to close your business down. Oh, and then by the way, we're going to annul all your contracts. And I totally get this. This is nice. These people need help. But I'll tell you what, when you do this, it has unintended consequences too. So come in and tell people, hey, you don't have to pay rent and you can't evict people. So the rule of law goes out the window. As we said here today, the rule of law is gone. The courthouse is closed. Evictions are off limits. So the rule of law, that was the strong part of America. That's what differentiated us from a banana republic or China or India or Europe for that matter. We have a rule of law here where if you have a contract, you have to honor it. And that is gone as we sit here today. I hope the American people demand it right back, because it's fun to live in a country that's the strongest on earth, that has a rule of law, and living in a third world country where a government can dictate your life, that isn't any fun at all. I hope we don't do that. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to read you this one because this was stunning to me. That man up there is the head of the health department in Ventura County. I watched the video. I don't do Facebook. I don't do any anti-social media. I go straight to sources before I believe anything. And here's what he goes. He goes, okay, we're going to start testing and we're going to find more people with COVID. And then we're going to start contact tracing. And this is his words. We're going to hire thousands of people to act as contact tracers. We'll find every one of their contacts and we will make sure they're quarantined. And people who live in homes where they could expose family members would be moved into other kinds of housing provided by the county. If they live in a home where there's only one bathroom, we're not going to be able to keep that person in their home. You know what he's saying? He's saying if you work for a construction crew, and there's 8 of you out there and your livelihood depends on this, and one of you gets sick, then all of your construction crew is going to be quarantined for 14 days, and they're going to take the mom or dad away from the house and put them in a hotel. And I heard this guy say, oh, and we'll put them in housing, and then we'll provide for them. We'll provide for them food, and we've got your back. And I'd love to hear the mayor of Ventura County say, how are you going to pay for that?
Yeah, right.
So this has got to stop. I don't know what this is. This contact tracing thing makes sense in a certain kind of way, but to quarantine people and put them out of business and ruin their business and ruin their lives because they got sick, there is something grossly wrong with this. Right. It just gives me goosebumps. I can't believe I live in a country where this is happening. Next slide, please. And so here's the fundamental question that's going to slow down growth. These are byproducts of government policies. Government does their best, I think, to try to do the right thing, but it's hard to do the right thing, and they make a lot of mistakes. And the unintended consequence of this is, are we going to have to close our businesses again next December? And so as people start to get back into business and open up again, they're going to be slower to hire, because it's like, how many months is it till December right now? It seems like it's about 7 months from now. Next slide, please. The recovery is going to be uneven. So don't let anybody tell you it's going to be a U shape, a V shape, a W shape, a Nike swoosh, whatever those are. Those are meaningless terms, because every city in America is going to be different. So if someone asks you, if you're a consultant, if people are buying houses along with you, or asking you questions about buying houses or the stock market or anything else, telling them you think it's going to be a V shape or a U shape is adding absolutely nothing to their ability to make business decisions. These are my takes on things. There's going to be more warehouse space, because we found out that just-in-time manufacturing doesn't work. When you have a sudden surge in demand, the products are gone off your shelf. We're going to have more demand for open spaces in the suburbs. If I could short sell, if there was a financial instrument to short sell the urban vibe, I would be buying that in spades. The urban vibe just isn't near as fun as it was 3 months ago. So I can see people moving out to the suburbs. I can see people moving to smaller towns, 40 minutes away from the urban metro area, because I could see their boss saying, you know what, I can measure your productivity now. You can work from home. I want you to come into the office on Monday for a 3-hour staff meeting, and then I don't want to see you until next Monday. I just want you to stay home and work. And so you don't have to live in a downtown area where you have to touch an elevator. How are people going to get to work in New York City with spacing, whatever they call that? How are you going to space people out that way? They're talking about using a reservation service for the elevator. Won't that be interesting, to use your elevator app so you can get a reservation, so you can be one of 3 people that get on the elevator over the next 45 minutes? I mean, this isn't going to work. It's a great idea, but in practicality, great ideas are neat in a vacuum, but when it faces reality, reality always overwhelms a great idea. I've convinced that the Federal Reserve wants us to have 2.5% 30-year fixed rate mortgages. I'm convinced that they would like that to happen, because it'll totally jumpstart the housing market. It will cause prices to go up. It will cause construction of new homes to go up. And right now, the 30-year mortgage should be about 2.3%. Because if you go back and look at the charts, the 30-year mortgage on average is 1.75% over the 10-year treasury. The 10-year treasury was about 65 basis points for the last week or two. It's probably up a tiny bit, but it doesn't matter. 65 basis points, and then you add 1.75% onto that, that's about 2.4%. Under normal banking conditions, the 30-year mortgage should be 2.4 today, and it's 3.3. And you ask yourself why? And the reason is because your government has screwed up the mortgage market. Nobody wants to buy them. There's nobody buying mortgages except the Fed. That's why you have all these programs, because nobody wants to buy anybody's bonds right now. That's why the Fed is buying them all. What do you think would happen if the Fed decided tomorrow, or Congress told them, you know what, Fed, we're not letting you do that anymore. You can't buy bonds. We're going to remove your ability to buy bonds. Our financial situation would collapse in a day. So I'm convinced that mortgage rates are going to go lower, even if the Fed has to step in and say, you know what, I understand these mortgages are risky. I know the government screwed them up and added a lot of risk here. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to make loans. We're going to make mortgage loans direct to the consumer. We'll take that spread of 1 3/4% over Treasury, and we'll make a lot of money on it. And we don't care if you don't make payments for a few months, because that's what Congress said you could do. It's going to be difficult for convention cities. So San Francisco and San Antonio and New Orleans and Orlando and Chicago, all those, nobody's going to have trust me, I live in hotels doing these things. I do 50 of these a year. I've done almost 1,700 of these since 1997. I live in hotels, and nobody's going to hotels. And I don't think anybody's going to go to hotels the rest of this year. And so my clients in the fall haven't canceled yet, but I'm switching totally over to these webinars. I have one scheduled in late September that hasn't canceled, and a half a dozen of them in October that haven't canceled yet, but I don't see it happen. And I guarantee you, if universities decide they're not going to let students come in the fall, and there's no college sports and arenas are not filling up at all, I'm guessing there won't be any conventions either. So it's going to be hard on those towns. You see, that's not going to be a V-shaped recovery for those cities. These are going to be slow. Same way with cities with big airports. I've listed them there for you. Same thing with cities and states and regions that are heavily invested in the oil and gas business. None of those businesses are coming back anytime soon. And companies that don't get the government handout. I saw this the other day. Your government approved a couple of $1 trillion in grants and loans to businesses. Well, guess what? Nobody's taking them. I saw this the other day. I can't remember. I didn't write it down, so I can't remember for sure. But it's something like 85 to 90% of all those loans that are supposed to go out to businesses are not being utilized. They're sitting there doing nothing. They're not being sent out, frankly, because the businesses don't want them. And why would a business not want them? Because they want to file for bankruptcy and they want to lay off people. And so this is how capitalism works, gang. And when things are going up, businesses and entrepreneurs hire people. And when you have a recession, that gives businesses an excuse to fire people and close facilities that are underperforming. Movie theaters, all the rest of this here, vacation destinations, sporting events and concerts. You can see here, this is how it's going to fall out. It's not going to be V-shaped for everybody. It's not going to be Nike swoosh for everybody or W-shape. Each city is going to be different. So if someone asks you the question, what's the shape of the recovery going to look like? An honest, useful answer is it's going to be different for every community based on their job base going forward. Next slide, please. Okay. Here's another thing we're going to have to watch out for, because everything's blamed on COVID now. This is what I can't get over in my mind, is why are doctors getting compensated extra when they check off the box that it's COVID related? Why are hospitals and other people medical people getting extra compensation if they check off a box that says a death is COVID related? This is what really scares me. This does not make any sense to me at all. And how these doctors that speak up a little bit suddenly aren't in the media anymore. I don't know what's happening here, but I know that's a fact. And the other thing is, what happened to all the strokes and what happened to all the heart attacks and the normal stuff that geezers like me die from on a normal basis? What happened to all that? And so I don't have I've never had confidence in the national media, because I know they're propaganda machines selling advertising. But I don't have any confidence in our health system anymore either, because I don't know what this is all about. But to get special compensation to call everything COVID, where am I coming from with this slide? Because anytime you have a recession and a business has bad news, the CEO will tell the company, It's like, look, okay, we got some bad news. We're going to have to tell our shareholders and the investing public that something bad happened in our company, and we're going to take a big hit on our stock price. Well, when they do that, the CEO says, all right, if we're going to do this, I'm not going to have a leak of continuously bad information for a couple of weeks. We're going to throw out the kitchen sink. We're going to tell everybody everything that's wrong with our company and how we're going to fix it. And so this will not be COVID related, no matter what the media tells you. This is normal business. You close plants that you don't want anymore. You fire people that you've been wanting to fire for a couple of years. And so that's going to be a normal part of the recovery. That's the beginning of the recovery in this country, when businesses do what they need to do. And guess what? When some company goes bankrupt, another company comes in without the debt and starts doing the same services and providing the same goods that the old company did. It's healthy, and it's what needs to happen. Next slide, please. So I'm going to switch now to the bond market. On May, I didn't even know it was happening, but on March 17th, I started looking on my TD Ameritrade account, and preferred stocks had always sell around par value of $25 a share. Often they might go up to 26. On a bad day, they might be 24. They were selling for $13 a share. I looked at that and I went, what is going on? And I looked at about 20 of them, and they're all selling at various discounts. Instead of 25, some of them were 19, some of them were 16, some of them were 13. That's called a freeze up in the market. That's called when a bunch of people want to sell and there are no buyers. That's why Jay Powell came out and said, we will print unlimited money and we will buy every bond. And there's your list right now. They're buying the treasuries, they're buying the mortgages, they're buying municipal bonds. And this is a new wrinkle now, they're buying corporate bonds. And the wrinkle gets even worse, because not only that, but they're buying junk bonds and AAA rated CLO tranches that are filled with high risk loans. So if you think the Fed isn't desperate, there's your answer. They are desperate. And that's why Jay Powell keeps telling Congress, we need more. The last 2 weeks, we need more. We need more. We're putting oil on the water here. And so this is what the Fed is trying to avoid. Go ahead and go to that.
Sorry.
That's fine. I've been thinking about this in the back of my mind for 5 years. I haven't spoken it about in speeches, but I've been waiting for a big recession to happen, because what the Fed is trying to avoid, and so the Treasury is as well, is a debt jubilee. That's a biblical concept, and I'm not a Bible scholar, and I don't memorize anything, even my own phone number half the time, let alone my wife's phone number. The fact of the matter is, in a debt jubilee, it's like every 50 years or so, people go back, and whoever they owe money to, the debt is forgiven and their land is given back to them. And that's what's trying to happen in our country and all over the world right now. Next slide. And the Fed's doing everything they can to not let this happen. Individuals have too much debt, businesses do, and governments do, and they're having a hard time paying it back. That's why the Fed's so desperate to get inflation, because they need a strong economy to grow to pay this debt back. And the Fed and our Treasury are determined never to let this global bankruptcy happen. Next slide. So what happens when you have a recession or a black swan event like this? The debt can't be repaid. So what do? We tell people you don't have to pay it back. No problem. Don't make your payments on your house for up to a year. It's okay. You don't have to make payments on your rent either. It's okay. And here's the government response. We'll lower interest rates so you can borrow more money, but it'll be cheaper for you to loan it. And we'll make you loans when nobody else wants to. That's what's happening right now with all these bond facilities. And we'll even print money and give it to you so you don't default. We call that helicopter money, where you just print $1,200 and give it to people. Next slide. Here's why they can't let it happen: because the stock market will collapse, so will the bond market, so will the housing market, businesses will fold, and pensions can't get repaid. So this Jubilee deal is a big deal. That's why the Fed is nervous about it. That's why Bernanke and Paulson were nervous about it in 2008. That's why Jay Powell and Mnuchin are nervous about it right now, because they don't want to see this happen. Our stock market, our bond market did collapse. On March 17th and 18th, it was dead. but they've rejuvenated it now with all these programs, and the stock market was ready to go that way too. And so when you live in an environment where your stock market goes up when bad news is horrible, and it goes up because they think that means the Fed will print even more money and lower interest rates even lower, that is a fake economy. Next slide. This is why I like houses. You see why I like houses?
Yeah.
Because the rent of the house right next door to me, if I owned that house, that rent is not dictated. It's not propped up by a government at this point. So what happened? Here's what you got to watch for. Some of you are probably worried about runaway inflation because you're worried that the federal debt might go to $30 trillion this year, and it might. But I'm not worried about that yet. In my mind, that's for another night. But in my mind, 48 trillion is my magic number. When our federal debt, which is 24, gets to 48 trillion, I'll start telling people, I think you need to worry about it. And how you'll know it is basically all of these things I've just shown you. But the big key is when people go to the bank and take their money out and send it to another country, and the US dollar starts to fall. Let me ask you this. Would you consider taking your money out of a bank these days? I'm talking to the whole audience. Would you consider taking your money out of the bank these days and taking it to another country? Which one would you take it to? India or China or Germany, where you get negative interest rates, or Italy or Japan, where you get zero interest? The answer is there's nowhere to go. If you show the next slide, please. This is why I think interest rates are going to stay low for a long time. The last time the bond market blew out was 2008. The Fed panicked, dropped interest rates to zero because they didn't want that jubilee to happen. And I didn't know how long it stayed at zero till I made this chart a couple of days ago. 7 years. Wow. I think the Fed funds rate could stay at zero easily for 7 years, since this is what it did the last time. Next slide. Here's the US dollar as its value to other currencies. I'm going to start showing this slide in every speech I give for the next 5 years, because people are going to get nervous about our debt going up and the fact that our government runs multi-trillion-dollar deficits every year. That's going to cause people to get spooked about inflation. That's going to make them want to buy houses. That's going to make them want to buy all kinds of real estate, as well as Bitcoin and gold. I totally get it. I won't be buying gold anytime soon. Here's your barometer. If the US dollar plummets, that's when you get runaway inflation. It's not because the price of gasoline goes to $4 or the price of eggs triples in value for a couple of weeks. Runaway inflation happens when money starts flowing out of America to other countries and the US dollar loses its value. And as you can see now, that isn't even close to happening. Next slide, please. Underneath the economy right now, I think the strongest sector in America is the housing market. It turned the corner around Labor Day last year. I noticed home builder stocks started going up. I started doing research thinking, why is that happening? And I was happy to tell people all over America that the housing market has kicked in again. It had gone flat for a couple of years, and demand to buy houses was increasing dramatically. And that's great because the housing market leads the US economy out of recessions. That's how they typically work. So I was telling people as late as the end of February that this is great news, folks. Looks like we were trying to maybe have a recession the next year or two, but if the housing market turns the corner, we may not have a recession for a longer period of time. Why am I showing you this tonight? Because I know people in this audience like to buy homes for investment. And so part of the reason your investments go up in value is because the people you're competing with, which are owner occupants, they want to buy homes. And is that all across the board? No. Do you think house prices could drop? Definitely could. Again, here's the thing about it. If somebody asks me about the outlook for home prices, I'm going to say there's no reason that home prices have to go down, period. There's not enough supply. But within that statement, here's something else I would say if people quiz me. The bottom third of the market has a lot of energy in it. I think prices in the bottom third of the market, wherever that is for you, it might be different in Abilene, Texas than it is in Southern California. I totally get it. But what I understand is in the bottom third of the market, those prices are strong and demand is off the chart. So I see no reason for the bottom third of the market to go down at all. The top third of the market, north of $1 million, that's weak. The supply of homes available compared to demand has been high for 3 or 4 years. Prices were stable, I guess. I could see prices drop in the top third of the market. I understand and I know that investors in single family, you don't buy $1 million houses to rent out for $1,400 a month. So that's a non-issue. What is an issue is some of you might be thinking, well, I saw on the media because somebody from MIT said home prices could fall 10%. If you're not familiar with MIT, it's a community college back east. They got a great basketball program, but their economists have a 50% chance of being completely wrong, and they frequently are too. House prices do not have to go down for any reason. In my mind, the top third could be soft. You could see a 10% price drop in the top third. The bottom third, I would think prices continue to go up. And as the mortgage rate drops down to 2.5, where owner occupants can get a 30-year fix for 2.5, they're going to bid prices up. Forget that idea that they weren't affordable. Well, they're going to be affordable at 2.5, and people are going to buy them at that kind of rate. Next slide, please. This turbulence in the mortgage market, I've always described it, but I don't expect you to believe anything I say. I got a beard. I worked at Texas A&M for a long time. I got my degree from their arch enemy, University of Texas at Austin. And I also went to school at the University of Oklahoma for a while. So everybody in the Midwest absolutely does not trust me, period. Plus I got a beard. So all this stuff is documented. You can read it for yourself. I've already talked about why nobody wants to make mortgages, because nobody's paying them back right now. That's kind of an asset you don't really want to own, where your income stream doesn't come because your government has sanctioned people to not let that happen. Next slide, please. Okay, let me talk about single family for a minute here. I'll just read these because I want you to see them, and you got my permission to distribute this to everybody in the audience. And you in the audience got my permission to take my name off of it and put your name on it and give it at the local Rotary Club if you like. It won't bother me. Demand for single family is going to continue to grow. Suburbs going to be stronger. Small cities are going to be stronger. If you haven't bought any single family rental property in a small town that's got 25,000 people, that's 20 minutes outside of town, you might start sniffing around there, because I bet you people are going to be looking there as well. Next slide, please. Single family construction is not going to keep up with demand. We've had an inventory shortage in America since 2008. That's going to continue, especially in the bottom third of the market. That will cause prices to escalate. Go ahead and stay with that. That's fine. Mortgage rates, I think, could stay low for a decade because the Fed will keep them low with quantitative easing. Why? Because they don't want to have the Jubilee. They don't want to have that grass fire that burns out all the dead grass. You know what's cool why I picked that grass fire metaphor is because once you burn off all the dead grass, the pasture starts coming back green and it's very healthy. When you don't allow that to happen, it never gets as healthy. That's why Japan has been in a recession since 1987. That's why Europe's barely outside of a recession for the last decade. They don't allow grass fires to happen. That's why it's nice to own homes, and it's why it's good not to have too much leverage on your homes. I told my wife just the other day, I said, what would we do if I start to feel like the big Jubilee is going to happen and the government's going to start printing money and the value of the dollar starts to collapse, and I start telling audiences, watch out, this is happening. My conclusion was, what I will do, I won't be buying gold. I will just buy 5 or 6 homes for cash and wait out the big inflation event. Because an inflation event, the only people that get killed are people with savings. If I have 5 houses or 10 houses, they might be worth $300,000 today. But after an inflation event, they might be worth 3 million apiece, and they'll be completely affordable because the wages went up by that much too. It's just the poor people that have a bond portfolio or have their money in a CD or in cash, where they wake up and suddenly their cash that they thought they were going to retire on is good for about 4 cups of coffee. That's what I want to try to avoid. And that's not happening yet. But I hate it that I'm even thinking about it, that I even had to talk to my wife and say, what will we do if what I'm talking about happens? And that was my conclusion. Next slide, please. Investor fear of inflation will increase. Even though I try to convince people it won't happen, I know they just can't deal with it. And so people are going to be worried about inflation. And that's why real estate is a hedge against inflation, because the lease term, an office building is not a hedge against inflation when you got a 10-year lease. But a house is a good hedge against inflation. The only thing better than a house is a storage facility, because the lease term on that's 1 month. Stock market volatility makes people want to own real estate even more. Bond rates offer you nothing. CDs offer you nothing. So real estate is going to be even more attractive than it has been for the last decade. Next slide. So here's the risk to the outlook. Will the virus come back next winter? Will government force you to close your business again? What if the mortgage market doesn't regain normalcy and 3.3% as high as it gets? I don't know. 3.3 might be low enough to get us out of this recession in terms of houses, but I guarantee you they'd like it to be down around 2.5. What happens if the helicopter money isn't enough? $1,200 isn't enough. How many times will we print $1,200 and give it to people? How many people are going to file for bankruptcy or close over the next 12 months? The amount of bankruptcies and closures is going to escalate dramatically here as soon as June happens, where all these people that got these forgivable loans, the PPP, payroll protection thing, if you keep your people for a certain number of weeks, then the loan is forgiven and it's just free money. What's going to happen the day after that loan is forgiven and your restaurant can only operate at 50% capacity, or your hotel or some other small convention related business? What's going to happen the day after that deadline is reached? Here's the other one. Will banks and the Fed be treated well in 2021? Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they don't like banks. There's nothing, I mean, that's a free country. I'm not Republican or Democrat, could care less. Fact is, they don't like banks. What do you think would happen if Elizabeth Warren became president and she says, you know, these banks have been robbing us blind. We are going to prevent the Federal Reserve from printing another dollar. We're going to void every credit facility that the Federal Reserve has ever put in place because it's bailing out big businesses. You know what that would do? That would bring on the Jubilee. That would bring on the grass fire in a day. I don't see Joe Biden talking like that. I don't see Donald Trump talking like that, but we'll just watch and see. Next slide, please. So what I want to say is, you know, people ask me, hey, Mark, do you have any final remarks, something you'd like to say? And I like to end with this because this is why I'm bullish on America. I'm bullish on America even if we have the Jubilee. I'm not going to own any bonds. I'm going to be out of cash if I have to. Right now, I'm in CDs. That's it. I own commercial real estate through TIAA-CREF, and the rest of it's in CDs earning 3% down to 1.5% between now and the end of the year. I don't trust the stock market one iota, and the bond market's got nothing to offer. Why am I bullish about the future? Because I know Americans, and Americans will go back to work and they want to spend money. This is the cool thing about America. We don't tolerate deferred gratification, period. And that means if we got money, we're going to spend it. If we don't have a job, we'll get tired of a handout after a while and we will go back to work. People were going back to work in droves before this virus happened. And so it's just like 9/11. We're either going to conquer the virus or get used to it. Either way, people are going to go back to work. They're going to go back to spending money. They're going to go back to the park. They're going to go back to taking vacations. It might be very different from what it was in the past, but what will not be different at all will be the American desire to have freedom and enjoy life. I'll bet every dollar I got in my retirement on that concept. So with that said, that's the end of my prepared remarks, and I'm happy to field some questions.
That's it. That was the entire keynote session. Like I said, it was a 3-hour session. There's 30 minutes of introductions and conversation before the keynote. And then there's an hour panel featuring Kathy Fettke, Rick Sharga, Darren Bloomquist, Ken Chanel, Kevin Ortner, and Mark Dotsuhr for most of it, and myself. The entire program was about 3 hours. So, like I said, if you enjoyed this, hit like, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends.